Have you ever noticed how, like you stumble across those little travel tricks or those quirky facts,
Yeah.
and it kind of makes you look at the world a little bit differently?
Mm.
Well, we've been doing a deep dive into some really fascinating stories,
Hmm.
and they were uncovered by this guy, Salvador Orderigui.
Oh, yeah.
He's like a real expert in global communication.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it turns out that there's a whole hidden layer, like
Mm.
to travel, to the words we use. Like, it's incredible. It's the kind of stuff that gives you those great aha moments.
You're exactly right.
And that's what we're going to explore today.
Salvador Ordorica, he's got this amazing ability to pick up on these subtle but significant aspects of, well, our interconnected world.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is how these seemingly small details can have surprisingly big consequences.
Yeah.
Whether it's a clever airport maneuver
Wow.
or even like a little slip of the tongue, it can result in some really funny or even costly outcomes.
We are going to unpack some of the most compelling examples from his work. We're talking about smart ways to handle airport luggage. Those things that airlines don't necessarily want you to know about booking flights, tourist scams to watch out for, and the surprising financial impact of language errors in business and even Hollywood,
Absolutely.
and the wild journey some common words have taken over time.
Yeah, they really have. It's amazing when you dig into the history of words, how much they've changed.
It really is. So it's all about making you more savvy, a better traveler, and a better communicator. So are you ready to jump in?
Definitely. Let's start with something that I think a lot of people can relate to, trying to avoid those airline baggage fees.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah,
You find a great flight deal, and then those baggage costs sneak in.
right.
And all of a sudden, it's not such a bargain anymore.
I've definitely been there.
But Salvador Dorica's research points to this really interesting strategy that some travelers are using.
Okay.
Duty-free shopping bags often don't count towards your carry-on limit.
That's right. It's it's not something that's explicitly stated, but it's a common practice.
What's the reasoning there?
The general thinking, from what I understand, is because these purchases happen after security.
Right.
So the airlines kind of figure, well, you weren't planning on bringing that initially.
Right.
So it's almost like a little bonus for indulging in some retail therapy before your flight.
Which I am so guilty of. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Some savvy travelers are taking this a step further.
Oh,
They bring an empty duty-free bag with their regular carry-on.
okay.
And then, get this, they discreetly transfer some of their other items into the duty-free bag.
Interesting.
Because the bag itself looks legit, right?
Yeah.
Camouflage under the radar.
It's a clever way to, kind of work within the existing rules, although perhaps maybe not exactly in the spirit of them.
Right, right.
I mean, since there aren't specific regulations against using duty-free bags this way, it kind of exists in this gray area.
It's a loophole.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And, it makes you wonder if maybe at some point airports might start looking more closely at this, at the size of duty-free bags allowed, maybe even the type.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that.
You never know how these things will evolve over time.
Definitely not a sure thing. As Ordorica points out, you might run into that one gate agent who's having a very thorough day.
Yeah, exactly.
Still, I think it's a pretty interesting tactic to keep in mind if you're trying to maximize your carry-on space.
For sure.
Now, let's look at another travel tactic that's definitely on the airline's radar. And not in a good way, skip lagging.
Yeah.
Or hidden city ticketing.
Yes. This is a strategy that can result in some pretty significant savings,
Okay.
but it's also one that airlines really, really frown upon.
So for anyone who hasn't heard of it, skip lagging is when you book a flight with a layover, but your actual destination is the layover city. The reason, sometimes those connecting flights are way cheaper than a direct flight to that layover city.
Exactly. For example, let's say you want to fly to Chicago.
Okay.
A direct flight from, say, New York to Chicago might be quite expensive.
Right.
But a flight from New York to Minneapolis with a layover in Chicago could be significantly cheaper.
Oh, interesting.
So what you do is you book that flight to Minneapolis,
Okay.
you get off the plane in Chicago,
Right.
and you just don't take the connecting flight.
Right.
Chicago was your destination all along.
Skip lagging.
Exactly.
It sounds like a really smart way to save money, so why do the airlines have such a problem with it?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, it disrupts their pricing models and how they forecast demand.
Oh, okay.
Airlines use these really sophisticated algorithms, what they call yield management systems, to predict how many seats they can sell at different prices based on the entire route of the flight.
Oh.
So when passengers skip legs of their journey, it kind of throws those calculations off.
Right.
It messes with their data.
Yeah.
Another reason is that, well, frankly, it can cause logistical issues.
Right.
If a lot of people are skipping a particular leg, it can lead to overbooking on other flights.
That makes sense.
And then, there's the issue of fairness.
Okay.
The airlines argue that passengers who skip leg are essentially getting a discounted fare that wasn't intended for them.
So they're gaming the system a little bit.
Yeah, you could say that. Now, it's important to point out that Salvador Ordorica, in his research, highlights some of the risks involved for the passenger, too.
Okay.
One of the big ones is that you can't check luggage
Oh, right.
because your bag is going to continue on to the final destination.
Of course, yeah.
So you can really only do this if you're traveling with carry-on luggage.
Makes sense.
Another thing is you can't use this trick for return flights.
Oh, okay.
Because if you miss a segment of your outbound journey, the airline is very likely to cancel the remaining segments, including your return flight.
Right, that makes sense. They think you're a no-show.
Exactly. And perhaps most seriously, a lot of airlines have clauses in their terms of service that explicitly prohibit skip lagging,
Okay.
and they could potentially ban you from flying with them in the future.
So there are some real consequences there.
There are. It's not something to be taken lightly. So, I think it really comes down to weighing the potential savings against the risks.
Yeah. I mean, that threat of a ban definitely makes you think twice.
It does. And, this whole thing really highlights that kind of interesting clash, between travelers who are always looking for the best deal and the airlines who are trying to maintain their revenue.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move from potential airline trouble to a situation where you could end up with a seriously lighter wallet in a much less pleasant way. Tourist scams.
Yes, unfortunately, these are all too common. And Salvador Ordorica brings attention to some particularly shocking examples in his work.
Right.
Like that case in Mykonos, Greece, where some tourists were hit with an €800 bill for just 2 cocktails.
800, that's insane. I mean, how do places like that get away with it?
It's pretty outrageous, isn't it? According to Ordorica's research, a lot of these establishments use deceptive practices. They might have menus with deliberately vague pricing, so you're not really sure what you're ordering.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah. Or they might have tiny fine print, that's easy to miss, with all sorts of extra charges and fees.
So it's like a hidden cost.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are those unexpected service charges or seating fees that only appear on the final bill.
So you don't even know about them until it's too late.
Right. And they often prey on tourists who might not be familiar with local prices, who maybe face language barriers, making it hard to question the bill, or who just feel embarrassed to make a fuss.
Yeah, you don't want to be that tourist.
Right, exactly. So they kind of rely on people just paying up and not making a scene.
It just seems so unfair.
Yeah.
So what can people do to protect themselves?
Well, Ordorica really stresses the importance of being vigilant. Always ask for a menu with clear prices before you order anything. Do a quick online search to get an idea of typical prices in the area.
Okay, good advice.
And read reviews of places before you go. See what other people have experienced.
That's smart.
And if you get a bill that seems way off, don't hesitate to question it. Ask for an explanation of the charges. Legitimate businesses will be transparent about their pricing.
That's good advice. A little bit of awareness can go a long way.
Yeah.
Now, let's switch gears completely and talk about how even the smallest of errors can have huge consequences, as this story about a missing hyphen on Wall Street illustrates.
Oh, yeah. This is a fascinating example of how crucial precision is in these really high-stakes environments.
Right.
As Salvador Ordorica points out, this trader, he intended to enter a stock price with a hyphen
Okay.
to indicate a negative value. But the hyphen was accidentally left out.
And that tiny missing hyphen led to a $225 million mistake. I mean, how is that even possible?
Because in the language of the trading system, that missing hyphen completely changed the instruction.
Oh, wow.
So instead of a sell order at a specific negative price, the system read it as a buy order.
Oh.
And it executed thousands of unintended trades at incorrect prices, like in milliseconds.
That's crazy.
It's a reminder that the smallest details can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely mind-blowing. It really makes you appreciate the safeguards that must be in place now to try and prevent those kinds of errors.
Definitely. I mean, technology has advanced so much, but there's always that human element that can introduce errors.
It's true.
Ugh.
Okay, now let's move from financial fumbles to linguistic ones.
Hmm.
And this first one is a real surprise. The word nice used to mean stupid.
I know, right? It's hard to believe. But Salvador Ordorica's work on the evolution of language, it shows us that the word nice actually comes from the Latin word necius, which means, ignorant or unaware. And when it first popped up in Middle English back in the 13th, 14th centuries, it was used to describe someone who was foolish or simple-minded.
Wow. So back then, calling someone nice would have been an insult.
Pretty much, yeah. It's amazing how the meaning has completely flipped.
It really is. So how did it change to mean the opposite?
Well, it was a gradual shift over centuries. It's fascinating, really.
So walk us through it.
Sure. So by the 15th century, it started to take on meanings like finely dressed or showy.
Okay.
Then in the 16th century, it could mean refined or cultured.
Interesting.
By the 17th century, it evolved to mean respectable or virtuous. And finally, in the 18th century, it arrived at the meaning we use today, pleasant or agreeable.
Wow, what a journey for one little word.
It really is. It's a fantastic example of how fluid and dynamic language is.
It makes you think about how the meanings of the words we use every day could be completely different in the future.
Exactly. I mean, language is constantly evolving.
That's true. Okay, speaking of language slip-ups, Salvador Ordorica also points out some truly unfortunate branding blunders, starting with Mitsubishi's Pajero in Spain.
Oh, yes. This is a classic case study in why thorough cross-cultural research is absolutely essential in global marketing.
Right.
So Mitsubishi, they successfully launched their SUV called the Pajero in a lot of markets around the world.
Okay.
However, they apparently didn't realize that in Spanish slang, especially in Spain, Pajero is a very vulgar term. It's not something you'd want to associate with your brand.
Pajero.
And, this kind of oversight can lead to significant embarrassment and even the need for costly rebranding.
I can only imagine how awkward it must have been trying to market the Mitsubishi you-know-what.
Oh, I'm sure there were some uncomfortable situations. As soon as they became aware of the unfortunate meaning, they wisely rebranded the vehicle as the Montero in Spanish-speaking markets.
Good save. Ordorica also mentioned some other similar branding fails, like the Chevrolet Nova, right?
Yes, Chevrolet Nova is another famous example.
And the issue there was?
Well, in Spanish, Nova literally translates to doesn't go, which, isn't exactly the book's message for a car.
Right. Not the most inspiring slogan.
Not really. Then there was the Ford Pinto, which also had an unfortunate meaning in Brazilian Portuguese slang.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, not a good association for a car either. And Nokia, they had a phone called the Lumia, which apparently sounded a little too close to a Spanish slang term for, well, let's just say it wasn't flattering.
Wow. So many potential pitfalls.
It really highlights how important it is to do your research and carefully vet your brand names in every language and cultural context you're going into.
It's a lesson worth learning for sure. Okay, and finally, even Hollywood isn't immune to the occasional translation fail, as Salvador Ordorica shows us with this Avengers subtitle story.
Yeah, even with massive budgets and professional translators, sometimes nuances get lost in translation.
Right.
So in Avengers, Age of Ultron, there's this scene where Captain America says a certain four-letter word. You know the one.
Right, right.
Well, in the Chinese subtitles, that word was rather surprisingly translated as my old familiar partner.
My old familiar partner. That's so weird.
It completely misses the mark, doesn't it? For audiences who understood English, it must have been so confusing.
It's like what?
Exactly. Now, Ordorica offers a few possible reasons for this. Maybe the translator was trying to avoid profanity in the subtitles.
Okay, I could see that.
Or perhaps they just didn't fully grasp the idiomatic meaning of the phrase and its cultural weight.
Yeah, it can be tricky.
It really highlights how challenging translation can be, especially when it comes to idioms and slang.
Absolutely. Now, Ordorica has collected some other pretty funny subtitle fails too, right?
Oh yeah, he's got a whole treasure trove of them. Like in the German dub of Die Hard, Bruce Willis's famous line, "Yippee-ki-yay," it became "Yippee-ki-yay Schweinebeck," which means, big face.
Big face.
Yeah, not quite as menacing.
Not at all.
And then there was a Chinese subtitled version of The Sixth Sense where I see dead people. It was translating as I see ghost people.
Losing a bit of the creepiness there.
Definitely less impactful.
And what about this No Country for Old Men one?
Oh, right. So in the Spanish subtitles for No Country for Old Men, when the character says call it, when he's flipping a coin.
Yeah.
It was translated as lamalo, which actually means call him or it on the phone.
Oh, so they completely missed the context.
Completely. They missed the whole gambling context.
Wow.
So, yeah, these little errors, sometimes they can lead to some unintended humor or even genuine confusion.
It really shows how important it is to get translation right. It's not just about swapping words. It's about conveying meaning and capturing that cultural context.
Absolutely. It's an art form in itself.
Well, this has been a truly insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
We've looked at everything from, those clever travel tricks to those surprising language missteps, all thanks to the expertise of Salvador Ordorica, a true thought leader in global communication.
Definitely.
It really drives home the importance of doing your homework, being aware of different cultures, and paying attention to the details in so many different areas of life.
Yeah, and what I find so fascinating is how all of these seemingly different stories, they all kind of connect to this bigger idea of, navigating our complex and interconnected world.
Right.
Whether you're trying to save money on a flight or make sure your brand name has a positive meaning across different cultures, a little bit of knowledge and awareness can make a world of difference.
So true.
It's all about being informed and being prepared.
So as you go about your day, maybe think about some of those other hidden meanings in the language we use or, potential pitfalls in international interactions you might encounter.
Right.
You never know when a little extra awareness might come in handy. And if you're looking for more expert insights, humor, and actionable strategies to help you avoid those costly international mistakes, be sure to subscribe to Salvador Ordorica's Translation Tales YouTube channel.
It's a fantastic resource.
You won't regret it.